Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to witness me do two things that I never thought I would: play a deck builder and actually enjoy playing a deck builder. Now, as a kid, I always liked playing card games. Didn't matter if it was using a traditional deck of cards or something like Uno. I always seemed to have fun when playing with cards. Somehow, in my excitement of getting a PC with Windows 3.11, I didn't actually realize that it had Solitaire installed, as I was too busy with games like Wolfenstein and Doom. And the first time I actually realized my PC had card games on it was when that very PC was upgraded to Windows 95 and included Microsoft Hearts, a game which I hadn't heard of, but quickly worked out how to play. And given I wasn't exactly flush with new Windows 95 games, after spending all of my money on the hardware upgrade, at least in the early days, I spent a fair bit of time playing it. And then one day, I unknowingly played a card game on my beloved 486 for the last time, and didn't play another, at least not the video game sort, until a few weeks ago when I found Balatro. Now, how this came about was somewhat interesting. I was about to spend some time out of the country and had planned to take my Windows handheld with me and play through the 2008 Prince of Persia reboot. However, despite ordering a protective case for the device weeks earlier, the delivery was delayed, and I decided I didn't want to take my new shining handheld without some protection. So I decided to take my other handheld, of which I did have a case for, my trusty Nintendo Switch. But I just had one problem. I didn't really have any new games to play, and if you know much about the Switch, you know it isn't exactly a AAA powerhouse in its twilight years. So I headed over to YouTube search and searched for best new Switch games, and got watching a few videos, which all seemed to feature this poker-like game called Balatro, complete with gushing praise from just about everyone who spoke about it. Now, I know what a deck builder is, mainly from watching other content creators publish content on them. I don't watch these because I like deck builders, I watch these because I like the creators and appreciate their perspective even on things that I might not necessarily find enjoyable. But even after watching many of these videos, I still found deck builders to look boring. It was just like playing a card game. There was no epic storytelling, no cutscenes, no 4K visuals, nothing that really looked overly interesting to me. But on this particular summer afternoon, I was feeling adventurous and decided to download two new games for the trip: Balatro, which I was fairly sure I wouldn't enjoy, and Curse to Golf, which I was fairly sure I would enjoy. I spent about 30 hours playing my Switch on the trip, with all 30 of those hours being spent playing Balatro. Before we continue, a massive thank you to those who support the channel. If you enjoy this type of content, please do consider liking the video or subscribing to the channel. Now, a quick note on the video you are seeing. While I spent the majority of my playtime on Switch, given my limited ability to capture footage from the Switch, I repurchased the game on Steam, and the majority of the footage you're seeing is from that version. Balatro is available for virtually every current platform, but for me, it really feels best as a handheld game. I don't know if it's the association I have with holding cards, or if it's just the pick up and play nature of the game, but for me, the game certainly shines brightest on portable hardware. With that out of the way, let's shuffle our deck, pluck our jokers, and review Balatro. Firstly, I don't profess to be an expert on any genre of video games, especially deck builders, as this is my very first experience with one. So if I explain something which doesn't quite sound right, just check the comments, as I'm sure someone will be there to correct me. Now, while I don't know much about deck builders, I do know a little bit about poker, and this was one of the reasons that I think Balatro was a softer landing for me than initially expected. But to be fair, while understanding poker hands is certainly advantageous for the beginner, it's certainly not required, as the game does a good job of explaining all of the potential hands and how they fit into the game. One of the things I didn't realize until I actually sat down to produce this video was just how hard it is to review Balatro without explaining how to play it. So strap yourself in and let's take a look at just how to play Balatro. In the most simple form, Balatro is about making poker hands to beat a predetermined score requirement to progress. But in actuality, there is far more to this than a simple card game. Firstly, the game lets you select a variety of starting decks, with each starting deck effectively having a predetermined modifier. For example, the red deck allows you to discard one extra card, while the blue deck allows you to play an extra hand per game. There are also other decks which you unlock as you progress through the game, allowing even more starting modifiers as well as a difficulty modifier. Now, in the case of the red deck, once you've chosen your deck, the game starts and you're dealt 8 cards from a deck of 52, along with a score target of 300 and up to 4 hands and 4 discards to reach this score. Scoring is made up of base chips and a multiplier. Effectively, your score is the base times by the multiplier, which varies depending on the exact hand you're playing. You can see these potential scores by tapping Run Info and looking at the poker hands. Now from here, you can either play a hand to begin scoring or discard up to 5 cards, with the possibility to receive 5 new cards to make an even stronger hand. You can mix and match between playing hands and discarding, so long as you reach the score requirement and don't run out of hands. Once you meet the score requirement, the round ends and you're awarded a cash amount which can be spent on the next screen, the store. Now I said the game is more than a simple card game, and this is where things start to get a little more complex. While the first few rounds have some fairly easy score targets, this quickly ramps up to a degree which would be impossible to attain even with the best cards being played, and this is where modifiers come into play. Now I'm going to oversimplify this because this is a review and not a guide video, but there are essentially 3 types of modifiers. Jokers, which offer specific modifiers over time, for example a multiplier if you have specific cards or jokers held, or a bonus of chips depending on specific circumstances. Vouchers, which offer a range of high-value buffs to be used either as a one-off or passively, and card packs, which offer the ability to modify your deck or jokers with additional modifiers, with everything from changing some of your cards to a specific suit to adding or destroying specific, sometimes random, cards in your deck. Now, I'll be honest, when I first saw the option to destroy cards, I thought, why on earth would you want to destroy cards? Is this some kind of trap? Then I realized that if you eliminate lower scoring cards, for example a 2, your chances of drawing a higher value card from your deck based on the fixed amount of discards you have goes up. Oh, and you can also use card packs to upgrade the default scores for specific hands, which when combined with specific choices on which cards to add or destroy, can put you in a very advantageous position. But regardless of what you buy in the shop, every few rounds you'll face a boss. Now, this isn't some otherworldly creature, rather a specific debuff for the chosen hand, with a reward being progression to the next stage. These debuffs can be anything from debuffing all of a specific suit, meaning that playing that suit of cards won't contribute to scoring, to enabling only one type of hand to be played, which depending on your previous decisions can make these stages extremely difficult. Word of warning, specific things that you perceive to be a buff can actually be a debuff and make it impossible to beat a boss. For example, there's a boss that debuffs all face cards, Jack, Queen, King. However, there's also a joker that treats all cards as face cards, the advantage being if you have another joker which buffs face cards, all of a sudden you have each card of a hand buffed. However, in the case of a boss debuffing all face cards, effectively your entire hand will be debuffed, meaning you're not going to be able to score, requiring you to sell the joker in question and find another solution to improve your score in the future. Now, I could go into a lot more detail as to how the game works, but honestly, half the fun for me was working it all out. The game encourages you to make mistakes, but at the same time the game encourages progression, all in a fun and rewarding way. Didn't hit the score requirement and have your run ended? That's okay, you've unlocked a few new jokers which might appear in your next run to help you out. If you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you'll know I often go on about pacing and how much I value it contributing to the overall experience. In the case of Balatro, I would say it's almost perfectly paced. Yes, it is a very challenging game, and in the beginning, you will end runs in failure far more times than you'll complete them, but even when you fail, the game still manages to make it fun, and that's something very few games have been able to do, at least in my experience. I would argue that Balatro is more of a strategy game than a deck builder because it often requires significant changes in strategy, like the face card joker I mentioned before, just to stay in the game. And again, while this sounds frustrating on paper, in reality, it's actually a lot of fun. Like I mentioned earlier, on completion of the starting runs, there's also a lot more to do in the game, like unlocking a huge amount of modifiers, all of which you can check your progress against on the menu screen. There is easily hundreds of hours here, possibly more. Perhaps the only thing I think could have been included was some type of multiplayer mode, and I'll be honest, I don't even know how it would work exactly, but the exciting nature of the game certainly lends itself to something which can be played against other human players. Otherwise, Balatro is a remarkably solid gameplay experience. Now, normally I talk in some detail about the overall presentation and sound, but as you can see, there's really not too much to talk about here. The presentation is clean and styled in a retro charm, complete with a CRT filter-like effect, which can be changed if you prefer more of a crisp view. All of the artwork, from the cards to the jokers, look great and really makes you feel like you're playing a game straight from the 90s. I never encountered any bugs or performance issues on either of the platforms I played. Everything was silky smooth, a sure sign of care taken during the quality assurance of the game. Sound is likewise minimal but good. There is a soundtrack which plays throughout the hands, which suits the 90s vibe perfectly, and the only other real effects are the soothing sounds of the cards flying out of the deck or being shuffled. It's also one of those rare games which doesn't require the sound to be on to be enjoyed, which is handy when playing in a noisy environment without headphones. As you can no doubt tell from what I've shared about my experience with Balatro, I had an absolute blast with the game. Balatro also reminded me of the importance of trying new things. Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought I would have had the amount of fun I did playing a deck builder. Alas, here we are. While Balatro doesn't have a captivating narrative, a sprawling open world, or richly detailed textures, it does have a fun factor, and it has that fun factor in spades. Balatro nails the experience of having fun, which is arguably the only real measure of if a game is enjoyable or not. Personally, I am now a lot more interested in the deck building genre, and if there are any titles that people think I might enjoy based on my Balatro experience, please do let me know. But that's enough from me. Do you agree or disagree with my opinions? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.